In a world on the verge of collapse, Father Tomas, isolated in his church, did not know that silence would be his last refuge. Outside, the heavens were already beginning to bend. What he expected from above was the divine. What he saw, however, was a wound, a rift, not in the sky, but in the sacred stone itself that guarded his faith. It was not the promised glory. It was not the guiding light. It was a presence, massive, imposing, and with a color that seemed to burn the very notion of sanctity in his heart. He knelt, not in adoration, but in a cold dread. The once familiar shadows of that church now seemed to contort into grotesque shapes, dancing to the sound of a new and profane hymn. Then he looked at the stained glass window. The art that told sacred stories now became a portal to the most terrible of revelations. The shapes in the sky were not the ones he had studied. It was not the blood that the myths prophesied, but something more profane, a silent lament of faith itself. The statues, once symbols of comfort, now wept a dark and incomprehensible truth. The light that came from above was not there to bless, it was there to consume. And the first target was the greatest symbol of his faith, which did not burn with fire, but dissolved under a profane glow. He found himself alone in the darkness of a shattered faith. The light that revealed all at the same time blinded him to any hope of salvation. It was the peak of his crisis. It was not just the cross. The altar itself, the sanctuary of his offering, seemed to be consumed by that light, transformed not into ashes, but into something ethereal. The angels painted on the walls, once guardians, now writhed in unrecognizable forms. The sacred beauty disfigured, revealing something grotesque beneath the art. There were no more answers. The words that were once his rock now lay in silence, a symbol of a faith that had been broken into pieces. Terror gave way to an emptiness. What remained was not fear, but the desolation of a soul that had witnessed the very dissolution of its purpose. He no longer looked at the altar. He looked into nothingness. He was no longer alone. In that profane light, a presence, not visible but felt, an entity that seemed to watch him, testing the limits of his sanity. What was once the home of so many faithful was now empty, a silent choir. Where there were once hymns, now only the echo of incomprehension and desolation remained. One by one, the symbols fell, not in divine fury, but in a disturbing silence, as if the very foundation of belief were disintegrating, slowly, under the weight of that light. On that day 01, the church, Father Tomas's beacon of faith, turned into just another ruin in a world that was not being saved, but rewritten by forces that could never be understood. This was the gaze of a man who saw the end, not of a world, but of his own soul. A silent terror which echoes the emptiness of a faith that found no salvation, but a much older and more terrifying truth. This was the record of Father Tomas's Day 01, a day of revelation, not of glory, but of an incomprehensible truth that rewrote every sacred word. The evidence is clear. What came were not the angels we expected. And if Day 01 was just the beginning, what will the coming days bring for humanity?